Andrew Bolt, welcome to 1+1.
Pleasure to be here.
Your parents were Dutch. I believe you were born about a year after they came to Australia. What was it like to grow up in a family of new migrants?
It wasn't something that I was particularly obvious of being the child of, immigrants to start with, although obviously it had a sort of insulating effect. And I thought of myself as just being like everyone else, except there was a sort of resonance that you knew there was something else beyond that. Little parcels from Holland every 4 to 6 weeks. And that gave me an interest in other cultures. And in part, it's like, finding your own identity. I know that there's a Europe, And so I enjoyed it from that perspective. But later on, you realise it comes with a cultural baggage as well, or it's not necessarily bad, and that's been useful.
What was the cultural baggage?
Well, in one sense, as I got older, we moved around a lot, and with a shy boy in an insular family, moving around a lot, you were a little bit in the outsider role quite often, particularly when you went to a new school initially. And having that Dutch background sort of made you made me embrace the outsider status. So you observed more, and in a kid that observes and holds themselves back, you really think, what an arrogant little. But in a sense, it's been helpful that I find that I can take a step back and look on and not feel that I have to accept everything.
Your dad was a teacher,
Yes.
a principal. You had the opportunity to live in a lot of different places. What did your early experience teach you about Australia?
What you learn at the time as a child sometimes isn't obvious to you, and then you look back later and you draw morals and lessons from it, or maybe you just reimagine it. Maybe my imagining is not what it was. Overall, the picture I get is a country that embraces much more than what it's standard in polite society to believe. It's standard to believe Australia's racist, exclusionary, wasn't welcoming of migrants. That was not my experience at all.
And do you understand why your parents left Holland initially?
They weren't particularly happy with the way things were going for them there, and they decided to come here, make a new life.
Did they feel in their lives that this was truly their home?
I don't think so. My mother died quite some time ago. She's only 52 or so. And, sometimes I go past the grave at Murray Bridge and I think, golly, you're such a long way from home. And perhaps it's a function of having died so young, when your children haven't actually achieved anything that you have devoted your own life to realising. But I really don't feel, in a sense, she belongs in that grave. And in me, I think she really wanted to see me do something writing-wise. She encouraged my poetry and all that kind of stuff. And it's just the shame that, it was only, 24 or something when she died, that she didn't see that, I'd come good in some way. I mean, probably some people listening here will think I did bad and she's been spared that shame, but I wish she could have seen it. And you're as a mum too.
Is that something you think about often?
I do. I see it in my own children. I'm really keen. I love to see how they develop. I think it's really important to find an enthusiasm in a child. I think you're alive when you've got an enthusiasm, when there's something about you that's different, and I love seeing that. And in a way, I wish I'd started with children a little earlier, because I want to see my grandchildren realise themselves,
So your mother had dreams for you to be some kind of a writer.
I think so.
How did that actually come into reality?
And I had a facility with words, and that came through, my schoolwork, and I loved reading. I mean, I'm an introvert, so I read a lot as a kid. I mean, I just loved reading. I had a paper round when I was 10 or 11 or something like that. And I used to spend what I earned at the second-hand bookshop. So I'd go around my Saturday and Sunday collection of all my paper money from the houses, and then I'd cycle off to the Nightcliff second-hand bookshop and read like crazy. And then I started writing poetry, and I won a couple of awards. And then I just lucked into getting a cadetship at the age. Don't they regret having given me that?
How long did that last? Was that because you've been in and out of journalism, haven't you?
Like I say, I was an introvert, and I went to the age, and I was someone whose family didn't have much money, and a suit so thin I could see the hairs of my legs sticking through it. And you saw people really well connected, that had arts degrees, and some knew each other. One was the daughter of the former great editor, and I thought, me? It was weird. And it took me a long time to feel that I could do it. So I left a couple of times. I left to freelance in India, to work in a flower auction hall in Holland, and to work for the opera.
What was going back to Holland about?
Well, I went when I was 17 for the first time, and I stayed 9 months there. It was a little bit finding my roots. It was I had relatives there that were really enveloping. I really felt an unconditional love which just knocked me back. A sense of belonging. Now, it was a bit artificial, really, because I was born here. And as I've got older, that's become more obvious. I used to go around the world on a Dutch passport for a while. So that's informed, for example, my idea that you can choose your racial identity. You can choose your cultural identity. You can remake yourself.
You mentioned several times that you were an introvert. What did you think about the industry back then?
I was the kind of person you wouldn't do any favours for. And so I saw other people being mentored and all that. And I remember even asking one person I thought was great, Robert Haupt, at the age. I said, "Can I work for you?" I shriveled to think of it, and he said no. So I really didn't think I'd achieve all that much. I am a bit different. I see things a little different. I'm also what they say in Dutch, eigenwijs, your own way. And that makes you a bit intractable, too intractable when you're younger, and probably a bit unpleasant, a little bit pig-headed. But, eventually things fell into line. I lucked on becoming a foreign correspondent, and when I came back I was asked what I wanted to do, and I had the good sense, finally, to realise I could not be a good manager of people. It doesn't interest me, I don't know if that's my talents, and I said I'd like to be a columnist, and from there it just merged with the things I like reading. I'm more didactic than a reporter. I like to wag the finger. I'm a preacher. And it just clicked.
Where did you get your interest in politics from? You worked in Canberra for a little while, didn't you?
Yes, I worked I first worked in Darwin for the then Labor member for the Northern Territory, John Reeves, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it was more two things about it, more the thrill of combat, and second, which is one of the real seductive dangers of politics, and that is a sort of Manichaean kind of view. You're entitled to do all this sort of stuff, bad as it is, because the other side's worse. They're evil, so that licenses you to do whatever, and I see that so much. And then I went back a second time with a good friend of mine, Gary Gray, was National Secretary of the Labor Party, and he organised for a job for me with the National Media Liaison Service with the Hawke government.
What did you have to do there?
Paid propaganda. It's a disgrace. We use taxpayers' money to do party propaganda. So monitoring what the opposition said and using it against them where possible. I did a marginal seats audit for all sorts of terrible things. Abuse of taxpayers' money, but great fun. But when you say interest in politics, I am interested, but it's more the moral dimension. I like it in the sense of what is done, how it impacts on moral questions, not same-sex marriage and all that necessarily, but but also the character of a nation, how it influences human behaviour, how politicians behave. I'm really, in the end, a moralist, not an economist or anything like that.
What do you think was the sort of seminal piece you did as a columnist that kind of put you on the track in terms of this is what I know I'm going to be doing for some time?
When I first started, I've been a George Orwell fan. I'm not saying I'm George Orwell or anything like that, but I'm a George Orwell fan, and among others. And I went to, early on when I started full-time column writing, I went to an exhibition in the National Gallery of Victoria, works by inmates. And so all these fantastic works, of what than ever. And under each painting was a little, such and such is in jail and he's done this, and a little explanation, but nothing about the crime. And in the visitors' books, all these things saying, oh, it's terrible, you should be freed, the artistic spirit, you should be let out. How can we imprison such great talent? Entry after entry to that effect. And I went and researched the various backgrounds of each of the artists, and these sort of murderers and rapists and people guilty of abominable cruelty. And I thought, if you're going to stage an exhibition and the frisson is created, that this is the work of prisoners, and that's why you're there, they're prisoners, then you should say what the full picture, what they are in prison for. And that might condition the reaction people have to that artwork. So that was one, and it worked. The second was when I questioned the big push for heroin injecting rooms, which were the fashion. Everyone, opposition, government, everyone was for them. And I pointed out that the arguments being made for them were false. And the third, and I don't want to be unpleasant about it, was when Lois O'Donoghue conceded to me that she has not been stolen, as she had said, but abandoned by her father. And I took a big risk there in one sense in saying the stolen generations was a myth. And since then, nothing I've seen has shaken my confidence there. But that took an enormous courage because I knew I was going to get dumped on for saying it. Normally, when I'm writing, it's weird. Maybe it's pathological. Maybe I'm a sociopath. But you're sitting there and you're thinking, I'm communing with the screen. I'm having an idea. I'm having an argument with myself and resolving. This is the conclusion. Press send. And once it's sent, you think, oh my God, what have I done? What is the consequences going to be? It's like it's an intellectual argument here, but then you put it out there and there are ramifications in how people think about you and all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, it's not pure like that. I do have some sort of sense of self-preservation when I write, thinking, I better say that I'm nice here. But with that one, I was scared. It was so transgressive. I knew of almost no one that would agree with me, and I knew that would make me seem a terrible person, lacking pity, lacking compassion, a racist, but I knew none of that was true.
So that's obviously happened many times, that you've gone through that same fear as you're writing something. Does it get easier?
Oh, it does. I mean, is there anything left that anyone could call me that I haven't been called already, and worse? In a way, one you think the insults will now become just part of a wallpaper. Anyone that doesn't think that of you already, won't be influenced one way or the other. And something I learned from an unhappy stint at the South Australian Opera was, in one sense, people take their measure of your character in part by how you yourself conduct yourself under face of criticism. And I kind of hope, I know there are a lot of people that, ABC viewers maybe, that loathe what I do. I know there are many, many people that love what I do and what I say. But I kind of hope that the criticism now is just A, wallpaper, and B, in the context of so much else, that people will see, well, at least they're still standing and is not ashamed. And I don't think I've got anything to be ashamed about.
How do you define your frequent moniker, a conservative commentator? What is a conservative?
Look, it's a preemptive label that I've put on myself, because people are saying right wing. If you don't say conservative, they say you're right wing, and I think that's just I'm not right wing. I'm anti-right wing. So I thought if I gave them something else, which sounds a little bit bad, that they would go for that rather than what's actually bad and false. Because right wing, who wants to be right wing? But how many of us really are summed up by one word? You're not. I'm not. I'm conservative, rationalist, humanist. I like, like children to be looked after well. I like my garden. I'm an ecologist. I'm many things. I'm a multitude.
Can I ask you about your position on climate change? Your basic position is that you're sceptical that humans have caused the warming of the planet.
I know that there's a debate about it. That's all I'm prepared to say. I'm not a scientist. But when someone tells me, oh no, all the scientists agree, then I say, no, they don't. They will agree that there's a tendency for man's emissions to heat the planet. Whether that's responsible for all the heating is an open question. But I must say that once it was confidently predicted there was a runaway warming, and now we've had a pause for 16 years. Now, please explain that.
Was there a specific event or something you saw or watched that made you decide your position on climate change?
Look, I watched... No. For me, it really is... Look, if I saw the evidence all pointing to climate change, man-made and all that, I'd get on it. I'd be, reason is what drives me.
So it's just research over the years?
Look, I watched the Al Gore film and I did a little bit of basic research. I was struck by how many of the journalists hailing this as the gospel did no research and accepted as true that which was easily proven was false or dubious. Now, when that happens, you think something's going on here. There are people wanting this to be true, even the bits of it that aren't. Now, that is, as journalists, that's our business, to expose the phony. And it just struck me how hard it suddenly was for anyone to dare question. And the ABC, I've got to say, was one of the worst. And it's such a shame that the ABC wasn't part of just holding a debate.
Have you debated Rupert Murdoch on this issue?
Mm-hmm.
Have you convinced him to change his stance on this?
I couldn't speak for what he thinks. And I doubt that what I say, I think he talks to a lot of people. And I know that he had a conference at Pebble Beach where he invited Al Gore along. And I stood up and said, to Al Gore that I thought this and this was flawed, and he didn't take that very well. And I hope that had an influence. But Rupert Murdoch's a pretty deep thinker himself. I'm sure he would have figured out the truth for himself.
You've said about Tony Abbott, I think this was just before he became Prime Minister, that there were certain things he had to confess. His sense of unworthiness, that he couldn't measure up to John Howard and others. He always saw them as up there and himself as down here. But he's deliberately, bravely and painfully tackled that. So you were saying he didn't feel he had the strength of character to be the Prime Minister?
Oh, no, that's a misreading. I thought it was something he had to tackle to be a Prime Minister, but strength of character, no. I mean...
What was it?
I think I like Tony Abbott as a person because, like me, he's very introspective. And people will find this surprising coming from me, but very prepared to doubt himself. And I find that, obviously, I react to it as someone who has this too. And so like what I see in others, if it's in some way a reflection of myself. But I also think it's a very attractive human quality to doubt. I love it in humans to doubt, to question, and to be modest. But in a leader, to confess to all that is deadly. But also I thought Tony was too self-doubting in part, because I think there's more to him than he thought at the time. Now, I think it's heroic the way he's remade himself. Going back to an earlier answer, I know about remaking yourself. I think it's almost heroic, a very noble thing, and it's still not there. I mean, being Prime Minister is extremely daunting, but he will get there.
You say that you like doubt. That does surprise me. Your book title,
Why?
Still Not Sorry.
No, I'm not sorry. No, but the whole thing is, it's doubt that... people use the word skeptic now as a criticism. It's extraordinary. Can you believe that skepticism is now seen as a sin? I find that astonishing. Who would question religion, the dictates of religion? Who would have questioned the Pope? Who would have questioned, theories of the sun revolving around the earth? Or who would have questioned, how we got the plague? And doubt is fantastic. I am a doubter. If you come to me and you say you have a fantastic theory about how mankind can be saved with this great scheme or that new philosophy, then I will doubt it. And I really mistrust those that don't. And I find it really frightening how we've become so slave to theories like global warming without questioning them.
So when you say that you like doubt, you mean to doubt propositions, but you don't doubt yourself.
Oh, I doubt myself, obviously. This is where I think I'm, again, on a unity ticket with Tony Abbott. Yes, I doubt myself, absolutely. But the only thing I can say is, if I wasn't where I am, then some even greater idiot would probably be doing it.
So what do you doubt yourself on?
I doubt myself whether I'm right. I doubt myself whether I'm being nice enough. I doubt myself, I've got my facts sometimes there. I doubt myself whether what I write is of interest. I doubt whether people should think that I'm so great. I doubt lots of things.
You also mentioned the remaking of yourself. How conscious was that remodelling, if you like?
Well, there are some people like that awful Ann Summers, who think, oh, what you've done is you've opportunistically devised a persona or a shtick that will sell. No, it's not like that. The remaking is about seeing where you're deficient, where you haven't been open enough, where you haven't been firm enough, where you haven't asserted yourself, where you haven't considered, whether you haven't been considerate, all that sort of stuff. That's what it's about. And also, in particular, the seeking of identities and approval. How many people, you think in journalism, for example, a lot of people will say that our problem is that we write for our bosses. Let's say you write for the ABC, or you work for the ABC, but you write for your bosses. Me, I write for Murdoch. For me, I think the most prevalent sin in journalism is writing for the approval of your fellow journalists. We so seek approval, all of us, we do. And I think that is one of the most corrupting influences in journalism. And that's why I hate media prizes, Walkley Awards, all that kind of stuff. Journalists giving prizes to journalists and journalists looking for approval of journalists. I think that's so wrong. That's where some of the great groupthink mistakes of our craft have come from.
So you write for...
I think your loyalty must be to your readers or your viewers.
There's been a set of figures out recently talking about newspaper circulation, which is sharply down yet again. What do you see will be the newspaper landscape in 5 years in this country? It's not a terribly happy story, is it?
I mean, there's such a tsunami of information out there. Increasingly, people are looking for interpreters of it. Now, in a sense, that's bad, I guess, in that you'll look for those that see the world through your eyes and you won't actually engage with other points of view. But so, in one sense, I'm okay. But there is not the money to actually keep that all going. Increasingly, people actually do for free what we're now getting paid for. Is that good or bad? I'm not sure, but it makes the ABC's role in this extremely interesting because thanks to the taxpayers, you've got money that almost no other media outlet has, and you've got a reach that no other media outlet has. And that's why I just think, gosh, if the ABC could only embrace more pluralistic debates and hosts, this wouldn't be such a scary proposition for someone who doesn't share the sort of ABC, leftist culture that is outside that. But here I am speaking as a Dutch little boy from the outside.
Well, here you are speaking on the ABC as well.
Yes, but you're running the interview and I'm just the guest.
Indeed. You have blogs, you appear on radio, you have a TV program.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot of opinion in a week. Do you like that pace of work?
No, I've tried. I wanted to do one commitment less this year, but take it while it's there. I'm not short of opinions. I'm short of hours.
Andrew Bolt, thank you so much for joining us on 1+1.
It was such a pleasure.